Hello everyone, we welcome you to Glass Academy Webinars 2022. The theme for this year is Ideas in Architecture, where the word ideas expands to I for innovation, D for design thinking, E for emerging trends, A for around the world, and S for sensibility. Today we have with us architect Anabelle Vegas. Architect Anabelle Vegas is the co-founder and research head at the workshop. She completed her post-graduation in computational urban design from the Bartlett School of Architecture, University College, London. Her passion lies in creating experiences, interactive urban art, visualizing data, and bringing it to the public as art experiences. We welcome you, ma'am. We're delighted to have you here with us, and we are looking forward to your presentation. Let's hear it from you on your topic, design as a conversation. Over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to have this opportunity to share ideas, especially on a platform as such. So truly, thank you. And let's have some interesting half an hour together. All right. Right. So design as a conversation. I've essentially chosen to talk about this because I feel moreover, as designers today, we have the opportunity to be conversation starters and conversation enders. And through our design, through the prospects of what our design can be, can actually change the world. So everything from thinking about the future or thinking about the past can be showcased through design. And design can be experienced, the scales of design that one can experience is never ending. And it doesn't just limit us to a personal scale, which is literally the chair that we sit on or the table that we work at, the streets we live in, the cities that we are from or the villages we are from. Everything influences us, and hence design is everywhere and design is everything. And so it is, I feel rather, that it's really important that we think about design before we implement it. And hence that is today a very big trend of, how to think about design, how do we curate design, how do we iterate in design, what are the aspects that need us or should influence a way of us thinking about design in itself. So I'm just going to spend this half an hour to kind of talk about few research methodologies that we as a company use in the work that we do, and what is it that we kind of feel is important in today's day and age, and what is really needed to empower people, to empower our future, to be better and to be more cohesive as a community and as a species. So let me start by sharing with you one of my first projects that we worked on when we started our company back in 2015. So we're called Think Happy Every Day. The workshop is a makerspace in Bangalore. It's one of India's foremost makerspaces in design. And I'm very happy to present the company and the makerspace to you and the work that we do. So the first thing that I'd like to show you is a project called Synesthesia.
Synesthesia, a wide world where one thing inspires another. A reality where the argument of technology versus architecture becomes a synthesis of technology with architecture. Our aim is to present a proposition that technology made invisible in our spaces can help us create new experiences which engage, enthuse, and inspire. Synesthesia is an interactive and iterated structure, computationally generated, with acting forces as the design constraint. The installation tests rigid materiality and transforming it, engaging the user with a soft, malleable, fluid dynamism. The installation will respond to touch and engage the users with light. The installation will self-iterate during the course of the event and expose participants to varying contexts of the built space.
So that was Synesthesia, which was an art installation that we essentially built in 2015 after a lot of research that I was working on personally during my master's program, which I kind of continued as research into my practice as well, where we're kind of looking at what do spaces do for us, or what do we need our spaces to do for us. Synesthesia was born out of the idea that we essentially have real estate that is really, really important. Every square inch of space needs to do something for us. Otherwise, it's a waste of real estate. It's a waste of infrastructure. It's a waste of money, essentially. So how can we have our spaces respond to user requirements and user behaviors? And that kind of got us working on this journey where we looking at can our spaces iterate? So it's not just design iterating, it's not our thinking iterating, but can our spaces themselves iterate? And we started working on looking at how do we get technology, which is so advanced at the moment. I mean, it's getting more and more advanced. It's allowing us to do more and more things. Sometimes it's just a click of a finger and it's magic that happens. So how do we get this to do something like that in our physical spaces as well? And Synesthesia was hence a prototype that we built for Maker Faire in Bangalore. I'll show you the pictures a little later, but it was a prototype. It was a scaled prototype that we built, juxtaposing solid materials with something that was really malleable and fluid and soft, something as a material that could respond to users. And we built a single prototype to that was rigged with all sorts of sensors. So we kind of tried to go as extreme as possible, kind of utilizing all the different senses. So we tried to work with touch, for example. So touch in the sense, as you came closer to the installation, it kind of realized that you were there. Or instead of installation, we can call it a space. It realized that you were there and beamed brighter. It gleamed brighter. It gave you more light. It kind of opened up because we had a little IR sensors rigged into the installation. So the space opened up by brightening itself, allowing you to utilize the space. As one moved with the installation cued itself to beam and draw you in and out of the space. Hence, kind of creating these new spaces for people to kind of, be in or interact in. The sensors also were attuned to glow brighter when there were more people, when there was more noise. The idea was also to kind of test pressure pads that kind of realized that there was a larger user than a single person. So the idea kind of grew on this behavioral pattern and usage pattern of people in cities. And we kind of thought about, imagine now if we had bus stops, or we had, community play areas, we had walkways or street corners, or we had large open spaces that kind of had these modular structures that could interact with users and kind of expand or contract or be brighter or be shut down based on how the users interacted with the space. We kind of realized that, we have so many infrastructural zones or infrastructure projects that are put out there. For example, a bus stop, very simply, a bus stop that is out there. You have electricity running, you have your space itself, kind of abstracted for that particular purpose, which essentially goes to waste if there is one person using it, if that space was designed for 20. So you're not really maximizing the use of infrastructure. And this was a small little solution or a thought behind how one could rethink of a space planning infrastructure of a space planning project. We kind of developed modules that could combine together, expand and grow to purpose or to serve purpose for across scales of projects in the city, in urban spaces. Similarly, this was the prototype that we essentially built. It was a metal structure that essentially used plastic tubes, which are very flexible, very malleable, which could we had a lot of metal that was put in there, which moved. It was rigged with nearly about 700 LEDs that were attuned with sensors. And the whole installation worked, moved, and glowed based on user interaction. Synesthesia for us was a beginning point to talk about the use of infrastructure or the wastage of infrastructure as well on the flip side of it. It was presented at the London Architecture Festival, which essentially it got showcased at and was then also published in the the book by Laka, which talked about the future of architecture. The entire premise was we could have modular structures that combined to create as large a space as you needed. More the people, more the interaction, more the space it generated, more the queue it generated, more the light it generated. We also were looking at how the module itself could be circular in itself and self-sustained. So the entire installation kind of powered itself by the energy and the power of the users. So we had pressure pads which people stood on, and that generated power that lit up the space. The idea was that it could be solar powered. The material itself was something that was recyclable, so it wasn't really it was on a carbon zero footprint. The entire structure, as you see above, the image above shows you, how it was computationally generated based on factors of the land, based on factors of the site itself, what the site needed, based on factors of the natural elements in that zone or in that area. So the entire concept or the thinking behind synesthesia was that one thing inspired another, and that is how buildings in the future could be. Buildings could really stretch themselves or contract themselves or play on user behaviors. Sometimes, when you think about architecture, you think about large scale projects. I think the pandemic was a really good example about infrastructure going to waste in a certain aspect. And suddenly people started rethinking about, do we really need that much of space to be there? What if, we don't need people to sit in that kind of spaces anymore? Do we really need such large office spaces to be built? So now imagine if we could have materials in the future, or we could construct or think about materials that we're using in our construction today that could really blend this idea in itself right from get-go. I feel that the amount of resources that go into construction could be halved if we thought about construction in a different perspective. So this was a little bit of our beginning at Think Happy Every Day. This was the thinking that we started with. We always talked about using technology, especially with the amount of data that is out there, using technology to help us better understand what is required, better understand what construction or architecture or our urban spaces can do for us, and not always going for the point A output. So that was synesthesia. It was back in 2015 that we developed this idea. And the research continues. The research continues on what sort of materials we could use. Technology in itself has a lot of it has given us a lot of things already. We have sensors that are way beyond what we can use. It's just that we need to figure out materials that can be malleable, that can be used and fit for purpose. Um, a second project that I wanted to talk about was something on a different scale altogether, because I think in today's day and age, we need to be thinking about design across the scale of our existence. Um, Today, with IoT, for example, it has personalized experience in a very different way. We think about our products, we think about how engaging our products are, or what can our products do for us. In the same way, we were thinking about the urban scale, and what is the urban actually doing for its users again. You know, who is the urban? Who are the people that dictate what the urban is, and what is this urban infrastructure in return doing for these people? How is it influencing the lives of these people that live in it? And what could be different was the question. How do we start a conversation between the urban and its users, the players and the field? How do they talk to each other and get the best out of each other? That was essentially the bottom line of the thinking, the question that we asked. And we came up with the urban bispectacle. It's called the bispectacle because it was actually living in, or rather stepping into the shoes of these different characters and looking at the urban through their lenses. So the urban bispectacle is a data driven interactive installation that's at the crux of a lot of what we do. Because like I said, design as a conversation is not just meant for us as designers, but it's about having that conversation and initiating that conversation with the people, with the users, with every facet of life, with every age group, with every character, from every background. And that is the crux of all the experiences and all the art and installations and work that we do. So the Urban Pie Spectacle essentially was first featured at the Kochi Biennale in 2015. Post that, it got selected to be showcased at the Placemaking Week at Valencia. And in fact, in 2020, we were also selected to be featured as the Bangalore Pavilion at the London Design Biennale. But unfortunately, we couldn't be there because of the pandemic. But let me take you through the Urban Bispectacle. So I think everything begins with a question, right? I mean, all of us as designers or curators of experiences need a question. And for us, this was a collaboration between myself and another urban designer called Sandhya. So the question for us, living in Bangalore city and being urban designers from the city, which was essentially going through a lot of issues at that point, it was in a flux of being changed from garden city to garbage city, and it was a sad case of affairs. But the question for us was, is our city happy? Like, do we ever think about that? And that, I think, was really important, because collective vibes are what everybody feels. I don't know uh, how often y'all feel that, but that is something I really take on. And the question was, is my city happy? And what are the layers that sculpt our city? That's, I think, is extremely important to think about. It's something that we don't look at on an everyday basis, but it really kind of compartmentalizes what and why and how your city is functioning. So this question, when we asked, and we just did a general research, it was really sad to see that, our city went from being garden city and actually being talked about having nearly about 2,500 water bodies at one point in time, having bird species and tree species from like a never-ending list of them, to then going down to that today we have about 3,000 tons of garbage that we don't know what to do of, 4 million cars on the road, but that we don't have infrastructure to deal with. 8.5 million people in the city that it wasn't ready for. And that also means there are 8.5 million emotions. And that was the trigger that we wanted to, that was our trigger rather. And that was something that we want to really get answers to. What are these? Are our people happy? So this kind of got us thinking, and we went down on and curated our research based on emotions of the city. Because there was all these other answers, there were all these other numbers, there was a lot of data. Bangalore being Bangalore, of course, there's data about everything. There's data about where I've been every minute of my life in the city, which grocery store I'm shopping from, and what I've ordered every day. So we essentially wanted to bring it down to, finally, are the players of the city, what is happiness for them? What are they fearful about? What are they angry about? And what are they hopeful about? So this thought process was further distilled down into looking at who are the people, or who are the players of that make Bangalore Bangalore. And the four top things that essentially came on when you researched Bangalore. It was always talked about being, of course, the IT hub. It was talked about being a hub for education. It was talked about having a lot of garbage issues, and of course traffic problems. So these were the four main attributes that consisted Bangalore city, or rather talked about were Bangalore city. So we went on a rampage looking at all these people who were part of these four main broad factors of the city. We looked at drivers, conductors, instructors, engineers, IT workers, the sweepers, the traffic cops, servicemen, security, teachers, sex workers, garbage pickers, laborers, doctors, entrepreneurs, hawkers. These were all the different cadre of people or backgrounds of people of the city that we talked to. And sorry, I'll take it to the next. And our research methodology essentially was character identification, which of course was extremely important, because that really defined what the urban was doing for these different characters. So what do the characters feel every day? Does this feeling give them new meaning of the space? Does their interaction with the city change their emotions? Does the urban or the city really influence them through the day? And we did this by literally shadowing them. We did a complete 24-hour shadow of different characters of the city. We saw how their day went. What did they see from the first person lens? We also had a questionnaire that was put out, and we had nearly over 1,500 odd questionnaires answered, which were then categorized into the different emotions. Our data collection went through a lot of open source portals, because of course Bangalore has a lot of data about it. And yeah, a lot of online surveys that helped us categorize what people were feeling in the city. What were they happy about? What were they fearful about, hopeful and angry about? And this essentially were the 5 characters that we talked about and talked to and shadowed. It was a lot of data that we finally got down to. We had 12 GB of data, 92 maps studied, maps across all scales of the city, right from the 1970s, 1,500 survey responses, and nearly 16 to 20 hours of shadowing of the different characters of the city. All this information that was out there was then brought down to more, we had to present it to everybody out there, right? So this was then brought down to maps that told this story about Bangalore city. The 12 GB worth of data was further categorized into what people were happy about. And there was a lot of things that people were happy or sad about. The maps were interactive maps. They were real-time live maps that essentially concised all that information into packets that were accessible to everybody, every common person. Just for example, something that we were really that people said they were angry about was the amount of child assault cases, for example, that the city had reported. And the way it was visualized and the way it was kind of brought out for people to understand was 300 registered cases, for example, in a year were equivalent to 33,000 decibels of screaming, of a volume of, if we had that, the 300 children screaming. So the installation or the experience was to make information accessible to everybody. The information was visualized such that you could take back this information and really feel the information, and that was important for us. And I feel that is an extremely important way, or one of the ways, to get people to start a conversation about what's happening in the city. Because you can tell somebody that, okay, we had 300 cases registered, for example, but how do you really get them to feel it? How do you really get them to respond to it? How do you get people who are probably from a background or from the government, that who can do something? How do you get them to really feel and experience the importance of this topic? um, for example, another one of the maps that showed the number of manas saved for the city, when it came to the number of metro versus using roadways. So we were trying to get people to understand that probably if you did take the metro versus taking the same path via road to commute to your destination, you were literally saving 30 minutes of man hours per commuter per day. So that's a lot of man hours in this day and age where time is money. That's a lot of man hours saved for the city. So the data was literally compartmentalized and visualized to make everything accessible and understandable and hopefully effectively usable in the future of planning. We had everything from the accident cases, the availability of water across the city, the amount of pollution and garbage that was accumulated, which was essentially that people were angry about. But what was hopeful about that was also the amount of recycling the city is doing. So there was a lot of this flux of the good and the bad and about Bangalore city, and the experience was Bangalore through its numbers. We actually aimed at visualizing Bangalore through its numbers, and I think it was an effective way, because we got a lot of feedback from people who came to the installation talking about how they felt about it, the kind of questions that were out there, and the kind of answers that people received were very different from just reading a map or reading an email about problems of the city or the good things that the city was doing. The entire installation at Kochi was represented via 4 podiums that one could go, put on your headphones, and actually be in first person view of what our characters experienced in the city. All the other data maps were visualized on the floor and on the walls of the installation. The beauty of it was in this little telephone. We kind of love to create drama. And I think drama is extremely important for design and experience. It is something that everyone will take back and remember. So the drama for us was this very old antique phone that rang as soon as you entered the installation, very Matrix-like. And you could dial a number and cue an emotion. So the idea was that you walked in, you cued an emotion, and all the information about that emotion of that city, of the city, displayed and was out there for you to consume. Uh, so that's a little bit more. This was the installation getting ready. And yeah, this was the urban bispectacle. So this was talking about the city in a very different perspective, and why data is extremely important. And while data is out there, what we do with it will define the future of how a city can be planned, or what to look at while planning the city. Right. The next installation I want to talk to you about is one called Stop the Drop. This was essentially a proposal that we're working on. It's a research proposal that involved a lot of back end understanding about Bangalore again. So Stop the Drop was, again, the trigger for Stop the Drop was our depleting lakes in the city, and the conversation about the water problems, the clogging in the city, the floods happening in the city, the lack of potable water in the city, and of course the rising temperatures and the sparrows being completely extinct. So Stop the Drop was something that we envisioned in 2018, 2017, 2018. It actually talked about in 1973, and we didn't even go that far. In 1973, we essentially had nearly about 2,000 odd water bodies. Now, these are combining the natural and man-made water bodies, including all your tanks and wells and water sources in the city. And which very frightening, the frightening thing was that back from then in 1973 to 2012, we were down to barely about 28 or 30 water bodies. So that was extremely frightening to see. And if in 2012 was about 28, the projection was that by 2020 we'd have only 7. And here we are in 2022. So probably it's time to go back to the drawing board and see what's happening. But this is essentially data that is recorded with the government. The maps are were sourced from our government bodies, and there is a complete list which is out there for everyone to see. That it very clearly shows us, what the lakes were, where they were, and what they have become right now. And this is something that we wanted to put out there in the public, because the data is there, but it's of course not being consumed by everybody. Hence, we all go about, in our day-to-day business. So we aimed at putting this information out there for everyone to view and consume, and really come together, create a sort of a revolution of sorts, and say, stop the drop. So the idea was to have a public art installation that very simply showed us the depleting cases of our lakes in Bangalore. The research over here was not just about, the lakes or the water bodies that were depleting. For us, more importantly, as a company, was how do we showcase this? How do we make it so simple that everybody can take it, can understand it, can consume it, and it still look beautiful, because at the end of it all, we are designers. What was the material that we could use? What was something that would last in the outdoors? So multi-layered depleting shapes of drops depict the reduction in the water bodies. At each layer, the idea was that, we would have the names of the existing lakes of that time period etched. We worked across materials. We did our research using completely different materialscapes, from wood to metal to plastic to glass, and eventually coming down to, working with acrylic. We wanted we wanted to kind of have a symbol for what's happening. So we took the drop as the all-encompassing image of the lakes of the city, and every circular module represented a water body from the 1970s to 2020. So the art installation was visualized to be somewhere in the middle of the city for everyone to view. Um, Coming down from 1960 to 1973 to 1992 to 27 and 2018 is what the information that we have. We also went on to kind of bring the real character of what has happened to that lake. So the browns that you see here are the actual material from that particular lake, of what it's become, because there are a lot of our lakes that have dried up and have become, whether it is apartment complexes or bus stops or roads. So the idea was to bring back a little piece of that water body into the installation for people to really see, what it has become. It's not water anymore, but it is mud or soil or dirt or concrete at this point in time. So yeah, so that was Stop the Drop. The way of thinking essentially allowed us to have a very different conversation with a very different audience. It was literally putting down and a perspective of the city for every common person to come together and say we need to stop the drop. Um, the next project that I want to talk about talks about, or rather, I want to showcase how experiences, information, data, and design can be used across scale. While most of the other projects that I talked about dealt with the urban or dealt with kind of uh, putting out a question for people to answer, or putting out a narrative to tell you that, okay, this is what the urban is, and this is what you can be a part of. These are the things happening in your surroundings, and probably you can take a stand, whether you're a common layman or whether you're a designer in the urban. We're putting out a question and an opportunity for people to interact and be a part of the conversation. Tidal, on the other hand, is pure beauty. It is research, interaction, and experience and design with the pure aim of spreading beauty um, to the users. So, Tidal was an interactive art installation designed for an artist, one of India's very foremost artists, Shiloh, who was essentially invited to showcase at the Pittsburgh Art Festival. And we are her partners and collaborators for design and construction. So to talk about Tidal, uh, Tidal was a geofeedback installation, again using technology and big data and combining the two to create a piece of beauty and art. So Tidal was showcased in this 44 feet dome in Pittsburgh. To give you a little background of where we started at, the very general brief was, well, there's an art installation in Pittsburgh, and we need to put out something beautiful. But how do we make it relevant? How do we now bring about some information out there for people to consume? So since the art installation was along the banks of the river, we kind of thought about how do we get the river involved. And Shiloh's main aim with this installation was to kind of get people to, or rather realize that we as people are 78% water, and that connection with nature, that connection with the moon and the environment is what keeps us alive and breathing. And the ebbs and flow in our body are all related to the natural elements as well. So we took that thought forward, and while the heart of the art installation, there was a small little, not small, it was fairly large water body. It was a trough of water that was rigged again with sensors that a person, when they come to the installation, could put their hand in the water, and the water really sensed them and reacted to them. And that reaction was showcased on in the clouds under this 44-foot dome. But the data, or the what was showcased in the clouds, was essentially real-time tidal data of the Pittsburgh River. So we looked at 50 years worth of tidal data of the river, the ebbs and flows, its floods, and its times of drought, and that was interpreted as in the flow of the colors in the LEDs. We used over 5,000 LEDs on the whole to kind of create this dynamic pattern that showed you the ebb and flow of the river in the clouds here. So the entire installation was a communication between the user and tidal information at the end. It showed that you are connected. So whenever a person played with the water in the trough, that interaction was displayed with the tidal ebbs and flow of the Pittsburgh River in the clouds. So like I was saying before, so it all through the different art installations, whether it be synesthesia or the urban bispectacle or tidal, the idea is to start a conversation. The idea is to think about design that can go beyond. Uh, the aim is to get your users involved in design and not be static. At least for us, it's always been about user experience and communication and interaction, and that is something that we try to engulf in all our projects and in all our experiences. So this is a little bit more about Tidal, how it was built, the kind of background work that is done, the experiments that we did with different sensors, again, different play of uh, different softwares literally used to kind of get that effect, to get people to really feel the ebb and flow of the city of the river within the installation. A lot of our work, how we do it, the kind of the workshop. So this is our old workshop that is showcased over here. This is all the research and the background work that goes about building these installations and art pieces. So that's essentially what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to really put forth our way of working and aim a little bit to kind of get everyone involved in design, not just as an end goal, but as a process, as a journey, and a more iterative way of working and using the users in design itself, and to kind of define design, to involve them in the process of curating design at the end. So yeah, thank you very much, and I hope you all enjoyed the showcase of work and ideas. I'm ready for some questions, if any.
Thank you so much for such an insightful presentation. It wonderfully illustrates how design interacts with the community, and which in return helps in designing a better one. I'm sure our viewers must have learned a lot from your presentation, and as a result, must be curious to know more, myself included. I would like to take this opportunity to ask you a few questions. According to you, what is the role of empathy in design research? Like, how does empathy shape the overall design?
So I feel at the moment, empathy is something that really has become a key factor in influencing how we look at everything, like right from our products to, our spaces. It's becoming a very key factor of overall wholesome design. But for us, if you look at and you kind of dwell deeper into the projects that we have done as well, we've always tried to kind of have empathy as an end goal, as a question to our characters or to the users or to the people out there. Since most of the work that we do are public art installations, we want to kind of bring about empathy in them to what's happening, and put out the question that what can you do? Can you do something? Can you be empathic to, what the city is about, or what's happening in the city, or what people are facing in the city? And can you now become a player in this process of redefining what it can be? So I feel it's a two-way street. We as designers can also definitely think about it as a baseline, as a starter point, but through our design we can also have people become more empathetic, yeah, and kind of really really work towards redefining or changing the way they work or move or play.
Right. Agree. So, like, we would like to know more about, like, from you, about what kind of research usually goes into these projects.
A lot of human resource. So well, our work requires, or rather to be able to think this way, of course, needs a lot of different minds, different disciplines coming together. And that is where, we as a company have established ourselves from the beginning, from the get-go. It was always never about an architecture practice. Although I'm an architect, I'm an urban designer, but I never thought that, I could do things by myself. Like, especially projects like this or a thinking like this requires resources of all kinds, and most importantly, the right thinking or the right minds coming together, and that's supported by skill sets that are across the board. Yeah. So my team comprises of designers, writers, graphic designers, software developers, coders, hardware developers, artists, and in between we've had all sorts of different, people plugged in to kind of make things work and get our ideas across. Yeah. But apart from that, yeah, of course, there are a lot of technology, a lot of different softwares that we use, a lot of different hardware that we use, like everything from Arduino to Raspberry Pis have been like the core of most of our installations, because that's what it works on. Sensors across the board, softwares across the board, from development of design to kind of visualizing design to then creating the experience and interaction in itself. So I essentially design on, I used to design on Softimage. They are ice-based softwares, and goes down to Grasshopper. Then of course you have processing to work out your code and interaction. Yeah, so all of the above.
That's great. So, like, we now know, like, various stages of a design process and the different tools and softwares that are required to bring these spaces to life. So, one of my last questions here, how is, like, we were talking about iterative model of design. How is that different from the process of design thinking?
See, the thing is, design thinking can get you started, right? That's your trigger, that's your question. That's essentially where you kind of question what's happening. You question what you want to begin with. The very fact that you say, okay, why is this good or why is this bad, essentially gets you started on a journey of design thinking, right? Or it says, oh, I need this, but that's not there. So that gets you started on product of sorts, right? It gets you started on questioning whether it's needed, what is needed, if it were to be done, how do I do it? And that then gets down to research, right? So the iterative model, I feel, is different. It's not different, but it's part of design thinking, because it allows you to kind of create more wholesome outputs. And it's something you may not have thought of, So testing in the process, testing and reiterating what you've tested and why you've tested it and what is the goal of that test allows you to create more wholesome outputs. So I don't think they're very different from each other, but they need to go hand in hand. You can't only like question what is needed and come up with a solution which is one-sided or straightforward. You have to test that. You have to perceive what could be the different outputs. You have to test those perceptions and then come back to the drawing board to reiterate on what you've got as answers.
Well, that was very informational. So we would just close this session now. And on behalf of all of us at Class Academy and Ethos, I would like to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.